Hi, everyone. This is JT O'Brien. Just letting you know that the Commission became part of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security after recording this podcast. You can check them out at www.atlanticcouncil.org. In the meantime, please enjoy this episode of Biollywood. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Biollywood podcast, where we explore the intersection of biological threats and their portrayal in pop culture. I'm JT O'Brien, Research Principal at the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense, and I'm joined today by the Commission's Executive Director, Dr. Asha and George.
Hello.
And our Policy Principal, Rob Bradley.
Hi.
Today we're diving into the 1982 horror classic, The Thing, which is directed by John Carpenter. The film offers a chilling portrayal of paranoia, survival, and a terrifying biological threat that feels just as relevant today. The premise of this film is that it is set in a remote Antarctic research station. And The Thing tells the story of a group of American scientists who encounter a parasitic, shape-shifting extraterrestrial organism. This organism can assimilate and imitate other life forms, and the team must figure out how to identify and neutralize the creature before it can spread beyond their isolated outpost and threaten humanity. If you have not seen The Thing yet, we strongly recommend that you do so before continuing this episode. We will be discussing major spoilers from the film, so proceed at your own risk. Okay, so I think one of the most interesting things about this film was just how it was portrayed, like back in that time, in the 80s. I think it kind of follows on a little bit with Alien from that time period. So I thought that was really, really interesting that maybe there was something around that time period that was going on that sparked people.
From an aesthetic perspective,
Yeah.
this does seem very familiar and similar, as well as from a technology perspective, the computers kind of, a similar vibe to them as well. And there's also blue-collar feels of this film, very illicit out of Alien.
Yeah.
Even though obviously you've got a biologist there, you've got a geologist, a doctor, folks who do have degrees and experience, and they are ostensibly at a research station. There's still very much kind of a blue-collar vibe to the cast, especially obviously the lead, Kurt Russell, who's definitely being portrayed as an everyman who, kind of a John McClane, I wasn't supposed to be here today sort of vibe about him. And it's very similar to Alien, where they really are blue-collar workers. And so I do wonder if it was an aesthetic choice or just kind of the sign of the times that they were leaning into that sort of visual movie-making experience back then.
Or maybe it was an attempt to show a lack of education and judgment. Because I really felt like there were times in this movie where I was like, why? I can understand like going to, I know I'm jumping ahead, but going out to the other outposts and looking around and trying to figure out what happens or why something came from there. But then to say, oh, look what we found. Let's us take it back into I just thought it's just abjectly stupid.
There's definitely a piece of it where when you're confronted with, the evidence that they were at that station, as something had gone horribly wrong, you see something that does not appear, at least visually, to be of this earth.
Yeah.
And that organism, that organism which ended up being a merged human being with the Thing. It did strike me that no one thought contamination. Nobody thought maybe we should be protecting ourselves. Isolate,
destroy,
Yeah.
call it in, do
Yeah.
something.
Something.
Why are we dragging it back to our home base?
Sans any kind of protection whatsoever, aside from our normal Arctic gear, to bring this into just because it had been burned. There's an assumption. And yet when it's cut open and admittedly it demonstrates human organs, the organs inside appear to be not charred, not damaged, not destroyed, which would be the first clue of, oh, they didn't fully cook this thing.
Right.
Or what?
Right. And I am joking about the blue collar thing because blue collar people usually have much more common sense than was demonstrated in this
Well,
movie.
especially the way the movie opens with that entire opening sequence. What there's no questions that are being asked
Yeah.
necessarily, or at least questions that have follow up.
Hmm.
Why were the Norwegians chasing this dog
Right.
helicopter and shooting it?
Trying to shoot at it with a rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed that more and more of the workers at this station just wanted to believe or buy into this idea that that the Norwegians kind of went stir crazy, right? For me,
We should have had one out there.
yeah, and I think that if you think of Occam's razor, rather than extraterrestrial life,
Right.
you're more likely to believe that this person just went crazy and started shooting a dog for sport,
Right.
and actually attacked one of your people and shot them as well. And so I think perhaps that might have been what they wanted to believe at the time.
Yeah.
Obviously, as soon as they visit the station, and I think it was right for them to want to visit the station to figure out what went wrong.
Right.
But as soon as you arrive there, you find the ice sarcophagus, you find this creature. That's when you start needing to reassess what happened earlier that day, and maybe look at it through a new lens. And there was not really that level of critical thinking, no really epidemiological thinking in regard to how can we get to the bottom of what's happening.
Right.
Until the moment where the thing, for whatever reason, decides to reveal itself in the dog kennel and start assaulting and assimilating all the dogs, causing them to make a whole lot of noise.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was interesting why it decided to kind of reveal itself in that moment. Not really sure what the explanation was other than for the horror aspect, but
Yeah, especially since it's apparently able to easily assimilate other organisms without them making much of a noise,
Right.
or at least enough of a noise to raise
But
alarm.
can it stay that way? Could it?
That form.
Yeah, just indefinitely. I kind of thought maybe after a certain point, it just sort of tips over and can't
Oh, it has to.
maintain. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think one of the beautiful parts of the beautiful things of this movie that I found as I was watching it again was there's so much that's left unsaid or unexplained, and that's by design, right? Not just the ending, which obviously is infamous for that.
even the beginning, that there's a reason there's no subtitles for the Norwegian
Exactly.
person.
Well,
You're not supposed to know what they're saying.
yeah, but you can
look at it.
if you happen to know the language, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
But there's other things like the path of this biological threats movement through the crew. I've seen other folks of research, kind of other people's takes on who got infected from what.
Right. Yeah.
But it's all still very murky. You have to kind of make assumptions, and it's open to interpretation, and there's really no hard and fast answer. And I think this might be another one of those situations where it's left to us to decide, did this creature reveal itself in the kennel because it had to after a certain period of time, or because it chose to as part of the assimilation process? And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and before we move off the dog, I would just like to say that first dog was, I don't understand how they got that dog to remain so still. It was just that. I think it was so, it's easy to have a horrifying film when something is, assimilating something else, and it's like bloody and stuff is happening and it's just like exploding all over the place. That's really, really scary. But that dog, that
The way it just stood still.
stood perfectly still and just looking straight ahead or whatever. I mean, I didn't do any research on that dog to see if there was something special about that dog. Yeah, has it done any other movies?
I don't know. I don't know if it was a famous dog actor or not. It might have been. I do think that all levels of production and casting for this was very well done in that regard. Just for both between how they got the dogs to act early on in the film, but also when they're presenting the kind of moving the camera through the research station as this is right after they bring the dog inside. As McCready's outside, so they're bringing the camera through the research station that kind of helps establish for the viewer where everything is. And then the camera starts to go lower and lower to the ground, almost giving you the perspective of the dog itself, which is just a really neat way of almost putting you in that creature's perspective.
Yeah. And then, you just mentioned the scene with the other dogs. They introduce the infected dog. Well, they don't realize it's necessarily infected, but they introduce it into that same kennel or whatever. And then it starts to change. Or even before that, I think the other dogs are beginning to flip out. They're not happy about this, and then they get hysterical. How do you think the handlers got them to do that? Well, the one dog is just sort of, I mean, I guess at that point it's beginning to change, right? It's beginning to
try to get that.
But how do they get the other dogs? It's one thing to say to a group of human beings who are actors, okay, this one is going to start freaking out. Then you guys got to start running around the room, trying to get out, trying to, break the windows, break the doors. Go. But the dogs, and they were all like, just as far away from that thing as as they could get. How did they get them to do that?
Yeah.
And they were freaked, right? I mean, it wasn't.
No, they're not active. Like the dogs don't know they're acting.
No.
So what were they trying to get away from, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
I guess they must have been shooting it in pieces,
Probably.
right? Such that there was something that was pushing against them that they were responding to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
Something off screen that you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really well done,
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah. The practical effects, the cinematography, the direction, it was all, we'll talk about that later, obviously.
Yeah, but it was all just amazingly done, especially for the time. I think, and it still holds up
Mm-hmm.
like very well.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I know that you all have done other space-oriented movies
Yeah.
on this podcast before, but I will say before we move off of the kind of the beginning piece of this film, what it did strike me as I was thinking, watching this, that by the time this episode releases, we'll have done a meeting looking at astrobiodefense and defending against biological threats from space. And I feel like this movie obviously presents a number of reasons why we need to be thinking about that if the day ever comes.
Yeah.
Particularly the idea of quarantining whatever comes down from there. We're not talking about the pre-pull movie that was released 14 years ago now. But this idea that a Norwegian science team finds a spacecraft and then doesn't inform anybody about it and doesn't insist that we quarantine it and do, make sure that everything's okay before we open things up and start taking blocks of ice out.
Yeah.
A little concerning. Obviously,
Ridiculous, especially for that country. Never mind the space aspect of it. They are so used to dealing with conditions that are like this. Their processes would have been much, much more squared away. There's no way, for example, in my opinion, there's no way they would have come across this thing and then start digging it up and not call back to Norway.
Yeah.
It's just completely impossible to me. There's no way. Now, maybe they did, and we didn't see it in the movie, but it didn't feel like that. It didn't very much feel like, hey, we're all out here on our own, and now the Americans are out here too. The other thing I have to say, this has nothing to do with biodefense, but on behalf of the people of Norway, they all speak English.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're going to know where the American base is. It's not like they're going to be like, oh, I don't know what language you speak. Let me just try yelling at you in Norwegian. No way.
So
Yeah.
the prequel film attempts to explain that individual was the only person on that whole
Who
research
didn't
station
speak
who didn't speak
English.
And he's
Okay.
the one that survives not just the event at the base, but of the two people in the helicopter, he's the one that doesn't get blown up.
Yeah.
The other person accidentally drops we use a flare or something.
Something was trying to use it.
Yeah.
House first bond or whatever. Or thermite charge. So yeah, it's kind of practical a little bit to think that hopefully this one person out of everybody can't speak English and he's the one.
And any English. That's completely no English.
Yeah.
But I agree that there is this tie-in with astrobiodefense,
Mhm.
and we are going to have a meeting. Well, by the time we do this
will have
podcast, we will have had this meeting, yes. But the thing of it, one of the things I like about this, although they go to a gross extent to demonstrate this issue, but the point is, we don't know what's going to come from space. It's not going to necessarily conveniently present as a virus. That's just kind of a little bit different, but we already have it here on the planet. Or a bacteria that's a little bit different, but that we already have on the planet.
Right.
This is a completely different kind of way of
Biological.
biological evolution
Yeah.
and survival. I don't want to say that this is a realistic scenario so much as I think I really hope that when we're doing scenario-based planning that we're coming up with the wild and fantastical so that we can prepare better.
Unexpected.
Yeah.
Because we have no way of knowing how any extraterrestrial organism is going to interact with our biology.
Right.
We have no idea.
And I appreciated that. I mean, of course, you have to have been watching the opening credits to even see it. But I appreciate that the introduction of the thing onto our planet happened because a spaceship crashed.
Yeah.
As opposed to the very controlled and measured stuff we talk about with planetary protection, where we're talking about, okay, we're going to be in a spacecraft and we are going to go to another planet, and then we're going to come back from said planet. And we have to be careful. This is something we may not have any control over,
Right.
but it's still a planetary protection and a public health
Yeah.
thing, an issue.
That we can't afford to ignore.
We can. So now I can't get down on everybody about this because according to the movie, that spaceship they figure out it landed 100,000 years before.
Yeah. It was
before.
Yeah.
So yeah, they said the ice is about 100,000 years old. Now, admittedly, the individual who makes that statement may or may not have already been assimilated when he's making that statement.
Right. But if you assume that it was,
yeah.
if you assume, but if you assume that it was, then I can't rag on our ancestors of 100,000 years ago for not monitoring. But I certainly hope we are monitoring the skies, and watching for stuff.
Yeah.
And that we have some plan in place for if something like this happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting that it landed in Antarctica, because that is an extreme environment. So it showed that this organism can survive in those extreme environments, and that's something that we need to look at for Astra Biodefense, for things like that, and then also making sure that when that stuff melts or goes away, that nothing comes out of it. That
I mean, it also touches on, another concern that we talk about, which is ancient diseases being frozen.
Right. The ice. Yeah.
It's just an extreme take on that as well, but it's the same sort of category.
And I kind of got lucky that it ended up in Antarctica under the ice. Had that spaceship landed, even if it was 100,000 years ago, anywhere else,
Yeah.
it would have assimilated all life on the planet potentially. And humans don't really get a fair shake.
Yeah.
Not evolution anymore.
Yeah. Well, I do want to talk a little bit though about after they drag the thing back.
Yeah.
Now they're talking about doing autopsies and examining and doing. Now they do try and call somebody, and their communications are down for whatever reason. But so at least they try and call somebody.
Yeah.
But I'm struck by the poor personal protective equipment utilization. They had to have stuff. It's Antarctica. It's not like you can walk around without your face covered. You have to have PPE on for of course, just the barrier that provides. And then you can't breathe all that super cold air constantly without some help. So they had stuff. They weren't using it.
Yeah. Well, especially since, the individual conducting that autopsy, played by Wilford Brimley, is ostensibly a senior biologist.
Yeah.
His job to
Yeah.
and so you'd think he'd understand the risks involved with just willy-nilly opening up something.
He was wearing gloves, but that was it.
That was bad.
I just was astounded. He wasn't even wearing a gown. He wasn't like nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
Now, I suppose maybe they thought the reason they were bringing along the biologist was maybe for microorganisms, and they just never thought, we're going to have to conduct an autopsy. And yet they had scalpels and all that stuff
Ready to go.
But that might have been for medical treatment, I guess. I don't know. It just really struck me as
Yeah.
I would have, if I could have added a little bit more realism to the movie, I would have said, let them at least struggle with this and say, okay, well, I guess we're just going to have to try and wear our PPE for outside, inside. I also would not allow everybody to be standing around watching the autopsy. I would have said, everybody get back to your workstations. We're going to we're going to isolate this or take it to one of those shacks that they have. So it's, independent a little bit. Yeah. I just thought that was not good. That said, part of the problem here is clearly their SOP, whatever SOP they were following, whatever training they had did not take this situation into account.
Right.
And we talk about this a lot with regard to clinical guidelines, clinical treatment guidelines, the PPE guidelines. We, up until now, I would say today, we still kind of flop around and we don't know what we're doing. Remember when the 2 Ebola cases came to the United States? One day, the Ebola patient's wearing the PPE, but everybody else isn't. And then the next day they switched it so that the nurse was wearing it, but the patient wasn't, and they didn't square what was going on with the hospital HVAC system. And it just, why? I don't think, I think we can do better. I think we have to do better. We have to have policies and procedures, or not policies, specifically procedures that try to take into account the crazy, weird, fantastical, but also looks at stuff like, we have Ebola right now. We have this weird disease right now. Let's pretend it comes here to the United States. Now let's come up with a clinical guideline.
Well, and even in a situation where perhaps you might not feel comfortable saying, let's have a complete clinical SOP for this Antarctic research station, then the SOP is you isolate and quarantine the thing until you can get somebody from the mainland to come down with additional specialized equipment, personnel, whatever, to deal with it.
I will say, I don't know if you're going to say it, but I'm going to say it myself, JT. There's a TV show called The Helix.
Oh, yeah.
And in The Helix, something appears, right, in Antarctica?
I think, yeah.
It appears in Antarctica, and that group of people smartly said, we are not dealing with this.
Yeah.
Somebody call the CDC. Now, of course, we have to get into the ridiculousness of the CDC having that kind of rapid response and cold weather gear and all that. Yeah. But they went up. So that supports your notion.
Especially once they've gotten to the point where they're theorizing that this creature was trapped in the ice and therefore had lain dormant in cold weather conditions. And so, putting it in that similar condition would, prevent it from potentially spreading. Now, admittedly,
dormant, yeah.
But admittedly, by the time they've reached that point, it's really only applicable to the body they're bringing back from the Norwegian research station, because they either aren't, I don't believe they're aware at that point that the dog is already been assimilated.
Yeah.
But even so, you have a specimen that is clearly unnatural.
Yeah.
Why are you bringing it into a warm temperature environment when you cannot effectively quarantine it within your research station? Right. Why not leave it outside, either in a building that is not heated or some other place where you can keep an eye on it, but it is not in danger of thawing out, lest something be released or freed as a result?
I do have a question, though. Say something like this were to happen in real time today, either with the spaceship crashing or finding something like this. Permafrost is melting. We have a find. Who amongst the Americans, if we had an American team out there, who should the Americans call? Would the Americans call in the United States government to say, we found this?
Who operates the Antarctic research stations?
Well, it's like 5 or 6 different countries, I think, right? It's a bunch of countries. Technically, I guess, if you found something, you can alert the National Science Foundation, although their funding has, I think, been shut down. But would you contact, like, NASA? Because would you even know to contact NASA? Because you're not a space-related, it's not NASA who went out there. It's an Antarctic science team that went out there, I guess.
NASA wouldn't have protocols for this.
No.
What would planetary protection wouldn't have any protocols?
They might, but not any rapid response. I think if you want rapid response to that region of the world, you have to.
So who are they calling?
DOD.
DOD.
You're the only ones that could get there. Nobody else.
I think DOD is who's coming in. You do raise a good question of
who are you
reporting it up to?
Yeah.
And how does it get over to DOD?
Right.
Because DOD is the only one to what JT was saying, is they're going to have the ability to deploy personnel and
Right.
equipment in the
Right.
way that you're going to need, in the manner that you're
That's
gonna
true.
need it.
Yeah.
But NASA, I don't, I mean, maybe their planetary protection protocols include this, but I don't know if it includes autopsies or, quarantining material that's found on Earth and has been on Earth for a period of time. And what that,
Yeah.
especially in extreme environments, like all of our spaceships go up and down in idyllic weather. I mean,
Right.
what has NASA ever had to countenance dealing with something that comes down in a part of the country or part of the world that is less than good?
Well, I think
They do. I think even in, I don't know what the protocols are, offhand, but they do, like, asteroids or meteors do land in Antarctic. Like, that's the best place to look for them because they do get frozen in the ice, and they're, they're preserved really well. So I assume that there must be some kind of protocol for making sure that when you're taking those asteroids that have come, obviously from space and have been just sitting in the ice for 100,000 years, there has to be some kind of containment protocol.
So that
But who is doing the? But who has the containment protocol? Right. Rob's point is,
Yeah, who
it's probably not
NASA's
NASA.
doing it.
No.
So that
Although NASA would at least track the asteroid.
they would track that. They can give technical resistance, obviously.
Yeah.
They would probably take care of the samples once it's brought to them, but they aren't deploying personnel.
I think you guys are right. I think it would have to be the military because the military does train in cold weather. It's got the equipment and all of that. Maybe we engage in some kind of international cooperative effort because we might need icebreakers and stuff, and we don't. The United States doesn't have those, or don't have them as well as Russia and Canada do. They're icebreakers or iceberg breakers.
From a national security perspective, America would be extremely reluctant to reveal the existence of this to the rest of the world.
Okay.
Because if there's a to reverse engineering of their technology, they don't want to share that.
Okay.
So in that scenario, U.S. is going alone. They probably have to come up with an excuse for why DoD has been deployed down there. That's to secure material or whatever it is. They can concoct a story about having to save, rescue the folks down there or whatever.
Okay.
They have to. But
even
I don't think it's an international.
But even then, who are we deploying? It's not like we're going to deploy the Medical Service Corps. It's going to be right. It's going to be the mountain division, and they're going to go. I guess they'll have some doctors. I guess. I don't know. It's at some point. I think though you're right, Rob and JT. They're going to have to call CDC. There's no choice about that. And it wouldn't be called WHO because they don't have that kind of capability anyways. That's not what it's about. So they would call the CDC. And I guess we're going straight to quarantine, like the quarantine division would be going up there.
I think they're quarantining everyone and everything down there until they know exactly what they're dealing with.
Well, I think this is a weakness because we don't do great with quarantine sort of in general. But it used to be a much bigger deal, back in the day when we didn't have the treatments and stuff. Quarantine was at the top of mind.
Yeah. Well, and you're talking about quarantining people in a very, as we've talked about, hazardous environment.
Yeah.
How does that work? Are you quarantining in place at the research station? How do you make a quarantine work in that sort of environment? How do you ensure that the facility can be disinfected when everything is said and done?
And how are you going to determine how clean is clean?
Exactly.
Right.
In that we can't even do it for anthrax.
Well, let alone that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of open-ended questions there that we haven't really had to tackle before because there isn't a whole lot down in Antarctica encountered that would necessitate these sorts of protocols to be developed.
I had heard recently that even today there are still problems with communications and sending help to Antarctica when things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Recently there was somebody who was threatening to kill everybody.
Really?
And there wasn't really a protocol in place to deal with that.
Did this person have a weapon?
I don't know if they had a weapon or not.
How are they going to kill everybody?
The point, like they were being threatening to be violent. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Like it was, I don't know what the plan was, but someone went stir crazy, and that's what they were trying. There was a credible threat, so then they reported that back, and then they're like, "Well, we can't really send anybody, so you have to figure it out."
Yeah. mean, there's the woman, remember the
Yeah.
woman who, she was very isolated somewhere. She wasn't with an entire team, and she wound up self-diagnosing that she had cancer, breast cancer, I believe, and they couldn't she was able to contact somebody and say something,
But
but
they
they
couldn't
couldn't
back
get
it.
her.
Yeah.
So she had to conduct surgery on herself somehow. I wonder what happened. We should look up and see what happened to her.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things we ask about a lot, diagnostics comes up quite a bit. But in this case, I mean, what I wanted to bring it up because they do try. They're
They
trying
try
to
it.
invent their own diagnostics, right? They're trying to. They've got they try this test, they tried that test. I thought they actually did a pretty good job considering. They're trying to put together. Okay, now, okay, we figured out it can imitate blood.
But
So if we do a blood test, it should work or whatever. And I appreciated that they were trying, but it also, for me, it really made me feel like we don't know how to create a diagnostic test really, really quickly when something new comes around,
Yeah.
and we need to.
right.
And it's obviously even more difficult when we're talking about some sort of alien brain
Yeah.
that doesn't follow necessarily the same rules that we expect terrestrial pathogens to follow. I do want to take a quick step back from the diagnostics question because
Okay.
before we can get to diagnostics, I had a question about threat characterization
Hmm.
because I think that the film does a good job of kind of sowing some clues for the crew, most specifically McCready, to pick up on.
Mhm.
They determined that there was a whole bunch of flammable stuff inside the helicopter that the Norwegians were flying.
Hmm.
So he kind of extrapolates from that these things are vulnerable to fire, right? So that's why, and then obviously later on when they have the incident in the, I think it's the infirmary, where one of the crewmates ends up changing or revealing himself and biting off the arms of the doctor, and his head, it literally separates from the body in an attempt to escape. He is able to derive from that moment, oh, every element of these things are seeking survival. So that's how he comes up with the blood test. That all makes sense. But originally, when talking about the imitation of the blood, they are burning everything, every sample that they have offered to them. So there is nothing to characterize, right?
If they're burning,
They're burning
Yeah.
every time that they have, except for when they first bring the specimen back from the Norwegian base.
right.
But even then, Dr. Blair is assessing, oh, these are all human organs. He's not conducting any additional experimentation with that up to that point. And I don't recall if he is running, and I want to talk about him running his computer simulation in a second.
Yeah.
But if that happens before or after Bennings is turned by that specimen after it thaws.
Hmm.
But the point is that we don't really see them actually conducting experimentation with tissue samples
Right.
to ascertain what this thing even is from a scientific perspective. They are
Right.
just going off of observational accounts
But
and what they saw the Norwegians doing, and they somehow derived a lot of things
A lot. Yeah.
that I'm somewhat skeptical of.
I do think that they probably didn't have a lot in the way of equipment. They didn't have a BSL-4 laboratory there. They probably had like a minor microscope, but
Yeah.
not of the sort that you would want if you were going to examine tissue and blood, and to a much more granular level. So I don't know. I kind of thought like, okay, they're kind of doing the best they can. Where I had more of an issue, but I guess it's the same issue, was it Blair sitting at his computer and like trying to put everything together? I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
So I thought it was telling, and maybe it's just representative of how much time I spent with this commission, that in a movie about space aliens imitating human beings,
Uh-huh.
the scene with Wilford Brimley at that computer was the most unrealistic scene
Yeah.
in my mind for a number of reasons. First of all, as I said before, it was unclear to me how much in the way of tissue samples they had even taken that they could have studied
Yeah.
to have reached any conclusion about how this entity operates. Right?
Okay.
Right.
So let's assume they took some sort of tissue sample. How do you use whatever limited information you get from this to conduct a computer simulation, almost like Mission Impossible 2,
Uh-huh.
of a infected cell entering
Yeah.
and assimilating a healthy cell, and then mimicking the cell and then assimilating another cell as is represented on this computer screen. And then somehow that same computer can determine that if this thing ever made it into society,
Uh-huh.
in 27,000 hours, which is 3 years from first contact,
Yeah.
the entire world would be infected.
Well, I think you could put certain parameters into a computer and tell it to model. But I agree with you entirely that
Yeah.
all of that data
Impossible
wasn't,
to
so he didn't have
find
it.
it
Well,
first. Yeah.
especially the amount of time. You would have to know how long gestation how long assimilation takes. And there was nothing
Yeah.
indicated.
But you could put in an assumption. You could say, okay, well, the dog was running, or like this happened with this person. You could just say we're just gonna say what happens if it's a week, or what happens if it's a day, or what happens if it's 3.
Yeah.
But that's not clearly indicated. The way it looks like is what you're describing. Like, here's all my 4 pieces of data.
Right.
And
And then
this is what this computer is going to do.
It kind of felt to me like the ChatGPT of 1982.
exactly. Yeah. The ChatGPT of 1980s.
And it was just pumping out unrealistic simulations. Really impressive processing power for it.
But that's what I was gonna say too.
Realistic for this movie. It was very realistic.
There's no way that computer had the processing power
Well,
to
especially
do that.
for what it was. I mean, it's not like, even when we saw The Martian, right? The
Yeah.
movie The Martian, which we have not reviewed yet for this podcast. But recall, there's the guy out at JPL who gets an idea. He's doing whatever with his 4 or 5 laptops linked together. And even he is like, I need more. I have to check my math.
Yeah.
He has to go to the NASA supercomputer somewhere and sit inside, plugging his thing in, falling asleep over it. And finally, after however many hours or days, it spits out something in pristine conditions with a building's worth of servers. But this place, with an old-fashioned block
The block.
monitor,
Yeah.
I mean, good for them. I thought it was, let us do credit them though for forecasting
Yeah.
properly.
Correct.
You know, that someday that somebody decided there might be some kind of AI-ish something or other going on, and also for thinking we're going to have advanced modeling capabilities, and we are going to be able to put that giant CPU's worth of memory into JT's tiny laptop someday. But at the same time, they didn't say this movie was made in 1982, but it's really 2025.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be what you could do in 1982.
And that computer just felt like it was more capable of doing some things in 1982 than you should have been.
Yeah. I hear you.
But so setting all that aside, the limited data they had available, I did think it was interesting that they were somehow able to determine from that this, whatever this was, would attack pure or untainted blood.
Yeah.
They decided to try to pursue that sort of testing regimen, because I don't think they would have had enough information to know for certain that that's how the blood would respond.
Yeah.
And then you risk accidentally, basically false negative tests for people who are in fact assimilated or infected if you put so much worth and value in that approach. Now, of course, they ended up being correct, or probably would have been correct, but that's because they somehow understood that this thing was operating at a cellular level, without having a whole lot of data to suggest.
So, guys, refresh my memory. Didn't somebody pass the blood test that shouldn't, that turned out to still be infected?
No.
Or did they get infected later or
They got
something?
infected later.
Okay.
If they got infected, yeah.
Okay.
In that scene where they're doing the wire test,
Uh-huh.
the only one who fails is Palmer.
Uh-huh.
And then if anyone else was infected, they were infected after that moment.
Okay.
At least that's the movie has given us no reason to believe that they weren't.
Right.
Okay. There is one quote that did make me laugh, but I also thought it was really true. They're having some conversation about this discovery, and the Norwegians having made the discovery, and maybe about the spaceship. I can't remember. But then one of them says, well, why didn't they just burn it? Or why didn't they just destroy it? And the other person says, you can't burn the find of the century. And I thought that's not, I mean, I would hope that we would all be smart enough
Yeah.
to say we have to burn it. It's really a shame, but we have to burn it or destroy it or do something. But at the same time, I'm sure there are people who say about even things today,
Yeah.
this is an important find. This is the first find ever.
Yeah.
We can't.
Yeah. Perhaps even meaning even if that means human lives are lost as a result of preserving this find. Right. The
Yeah.
pursuit of knowledge coming at the expense of human life is a well-worn trope that we've seen in other films.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's very possible for a scientist to make that calculation if they believe that is the real case.
I would say all the more reason, though, to do what Rob was saying. Then, okay, preserve it.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying you have to destroy it, but how about you just put it back where it was?
Yeah.
Let's cover it up with some snow.
Military, and let's get into BSL-4 before.
Right, I could create a perimeter and another perimeter around that. Yeah.
Just not going to get credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that did bother me though a little bit about the assimilation process.
Uh-huh.
So they make a big deal out of saying that this thing doesn't assimilate clothing. And there's a lot of questions that I still have even after having watched the film and read some things and watched some other YouTube takes about when we're talking about assimilation, what does that actually entail? Because it seems like there are some times where it's, well, if some liquid from the entity gets into you, it can assimilate your body. But we also see an attempt to essentially devour the dogs in the kennel.
Yeah.
And so there's a question of if it's assimilating, does it then kind of spit a copy of you back out afterwards, and that's how it's spreading, or does it actually infiltrate the body and slowly change you over time? Because if it's the former, then it makes sense that clothes wouldn't be assimilated or consumed, like those raggedy long johns that they
Yeah.
or the pieces of McCready's coat to try to throw them off the scent of who's turned. But if it's the latter and it's just infiltrating the body, then the clothes being ripped apart or left behind doesn't make as much sense. But what doesn't make any sense to me at all is if you've demonstrated that these clothes are being ripped up and it can't deal with inorganic material, then how is it actually mimicking the clothes as part of the assimilation process? It is mimicking, unless we're suggesting that the clothing...
It's wearing the clothing, isn't it?
Well, but if you recall, when Bennings is turned by the specimen bring back from the Norwegian station, there's ripped up clothing of his on the chair as the tentacles are around him. Minutes later, as they chase the half-assimilated Bennings outside, he's not bloody at all. He's wearing pristine clothing. And
Well,
so
okay, was that intentional or was that a mistake in terms of not direction, but paying attention?
That's
to
the
what
real
they did?
the point of this podcast is to pick at these inaccuracies. And the point is that they are somehow implying that as part of the assimilation process, they are replicating the clothing. Now, the question is the clothing, in fact, a living organism that's part of the thing? Which would seem, honestly, with the scene in the infirmary when and I'm blanking on the gentleman's name who fakes the heart attack and then chomps off the doctor's arms. The whole sweater part's aside. And a mouth forms and then clamps down on him. So it's very possibly that it is all organic matter that's masquerading as clothing.
Yeah.
But it was something else today.
Or that it could. But it's interesting because then you have to get to intentionality, right? Does the thing, as it's assimilating all this stuff, does it think, well, okay, now this is what I have to do. These beings wear, or it wouldn't say clothing, but it would say there's this.
Yeah.
So I have to somehow produce this. And it would be interesting to go back and look and see what kind of clothing we were talking about. Because a lot of it was, if you think about it, it's cloth, right? That is organic as opposed to, plastic and metal and stuff that you might have in a coat or like Kevlar or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it can do it with something that's organic, even though it's dead.
Yeah.
It's still organic as opposed to
Yeah.
something else, a mineral, metal.
That's a good point. I didn't consider that it might depend on what sort of sub-material we're talking about here.
Do you guys think that it has the ability to think and plan?
I think that the movie gives some indication that the bigger it is, in the sense of if if it is mimicking or assimilating a human, it can take on higher thought processes that perhaps it cannot take on when it's in a dog or when it's a headless or a bodiless head that's skittering along the floor.
Yeah.
Or down to the cellular level, as they demonstrate with the wire test.
Yeah.
That it demonstrates
That was my interpretation.
an ability to plot and plan in a way, particularly in terms of the attempting to put blame on McCready,
Yeah.
or implicate him as a thing. I think it depends on what it's assimilated.
Yeah, at some point, somebody theorizes that the thing knows it's being hunted, right? And someone says that it just wants to freeze. Now, at this point,
Yeah.
it knows it's being hunted. This is not working out very well. So let's just get frozen again
Yeah.
and we'll just wait
And
again.
wait for someone else to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's an interesting theory, but we as human beings do a lot of humanizing of other things, right? We lend a lot of human characterization to animals and well, particularly to animals, I would say. And it's something that we're taught in biology and other things to not do that. You have to like not make that assumption, but we can't help it.
It's like like a fundamental way of us understanding something and another animal is to compare ourselves to. I mean, we talk about it with bacteria and viruses that they're constantly at war. They're not
Right.
literally thinking we're going to take over the bacteria and
Right.
like so, but we do assign those kinds of
Or even with like we talk about it with viruses a lot.
Yeah.
Like a successful virus doesn't want to kill the host.
We're not even,
That's
it's not even
there's one with you can't put the word want in the at all.
Yeah.
But there are these biological imperatives that the virus is following.
Yeah.
But wanting to be successful, but it is very interesting. The the tardigrades that we look at, and you've seen them, right, Rob, where they have the extreme, like using an electron microscope or something. You can see them. They have faces
Yeah. They have like little
or
legs
things
and-
that look like their faces and look like their little legs, and so it's interesting that we, suddenly we're like, somebody took those up to the moon and just dumped them out there?
Yeah.
How horrible for them, because they have faces, we think, right?
we think. Yeah.
So it does, like, it doesn't necessarily serve us, but I think all these things seem to come, like, together in this movie, which is why it makes it so interesting.
I will say that there is the scene where they find that someone has sabotaged the blood bags. So there is some higher brain thinking of trying to prevent them from being able to diagnose and identify who
Right.
is the thing.
Well, I did wonder, though, for that one, whether as a person is getting assimilated, it makes sense to me that there would be some people who would be afraid. They don't want anybody else to know. They don't want to die or whatever. And whether there's that pressure from the thing as it's trying to assimilate them, making them feel that way, or if they just feel that way. I did wonder, is it possible that somebody, not the thing itself, but somebody kind of on the way or maybe infected, went in there because they didn't want people to know?
That's a great question, especially since that what they don't do a good job of in this movie, and I don't think it was because they forgot to. I think they just they decided it wasn't as important. But they didn't explain, when you're talking about assimilation or infection, does the victim feel it? Does the victim sense that something is happening to their body?
Right.
Is there any moment of inflection where they understand they're infected, or does it just go entity enters the body and gone? And so there's a question there. I think it's a legitimate question because the movie kind of leaves it up to us to decide if an individual feels that they are no longer in control of their body, where something feels off, or was it just paranoia driving somebody?
Right.
Right. Maybe they are infected, but they don't know, but they weren't actually to
Right.
sabotage it. So I think these are good questions.
If we look at the dog, the very first dog, that dog seemed fine, but just odd, right? It's running, and then it's just the way its stillness and all of that. But it seemed okay, except for this a little bit unusual behavior. But then it did suddenly shift into just full on thing exploding out of it.
There are theories that as it's moving in the hallways before it's put in the kennel, that it actually is trying to find a victim. In that
Oh.
one of the crew comes out of the, I think it was Bennings, came out of the
Yeah.
room after he complained about the music.
Yeah.
Bob pokes its head in there,
Yeah.
and then it walks further in the hallway, and then finds someone else in a room and walks into the room. Of course, the camera cuts away, so we don't see what happens. But some have suggested that might be when one of the other crewmates is first before they even get into the kennel. So,
Wow.
but I did have a question when we're talking about, the impact of this, this entity on a host, or how it assimilates. At the end, they'd find that Dr. Blair had been constructing a spaceship in the bottom of the
Yeah.
tank.
Yeah.
And this entity is clearly carrying over some information or some memory
That's
from the
true.
previous host, right? The final thing has a dog head protruding out.
Yeah.
Because I think that, his previous host was. So there's this idea of memory, genetic memory, and carrying over instructions and inclinations or memory from one host to the next. And I thought it was a very interesting idea, because I haven't really seen it that much in films so far. But it has to be applicable, because otherwise, how would Dr. Blair know to do something like that?
Yeah.
He would. Yeah.
Although it wasn't a very big spaceship.
No, well, it was enough for one person probably, and he was doing it with a helicopter flight.
Yeah.
But I think it makes sense when you're thinking about this organism having to learn how to mimic the behavior of its hosts, or whatever it infects. It's soaking up knowledge and information about
Right.
things that it can then carry forward.
Right.
As part
For
of
its own survival.
exactly.
But interesting that it thought it needed to leave.
Well,
Right?
yeah.
Let's build a spaceship and leave.
Well, it could
I think
be.
it got scared.
I think it's part of the survival piece, right? Knowing that if it makes it to a more populous area that isn't aware of its existence, that it has a better shot at surviving and reproducing.
Okay. Actually, you're right. Maybe it doesn't have to leave the planet. Maybe it could just leave.
Exactly.
And just
Get out
go
of it,
somewhere else.
find somewhere else
Yeah.
where they aren't aware that there is a thing,
Yeah.
right?
The other thing I wondered was, why was there one? Just one? There's like a battalion of these things, and individual spaceships just flying around the universe, landing on planets.
I think there's a theory that it is kind of like a hive mind
Okay.
type of organism.
Uh-huh.
So there are others, but technically they're all one, I guess,
Okay.
in one way or another.
So where's the rest of the hive? Could be,
Elsewhere.
or we don't know that there weren't more spaceships that
True.
crashed on
Yeah,
the planet.
Yeah, I think one of the theories that might have been either officially supported or unofficially supported in written material, suggested that the spaceship maybe wasn't necessarily a prison ship, but was a ship in which there was two entities, one that was piloting the ship,
Uh-huh.
and the thing was in that ship against its will, being transported.
Oh. Which takes us back to, hey, we found something, let's move it somewhere.
Yeah.
Also could have been, it could be that maybe the pilot flew it to this planet that it just thought was empty, or purposely, like, let's crash land it over here where there doesn't seem to be anybody or anything. I'm doing the best I can. I'm just going to crash land it here and hope for the best.
Yeah, 100,000 years ago, what was even living here? I mean, there's maybe dinosaurs. I don't know, but it's possible post-extinction event there wasn't much around, and maybe
Maybe they created the extinction event.
Could be.
Yeah, they could have.
So
Fascinating.
yeah, this is something else to think about.
I think this movie definitely, that's one of the things I love about it, is it gives you a lot to think about.
Now, did this movie come out before or after Alien? I know I keep asking this question.
I believe after, because I think Alien came out in 79.
Okay. Okay.
I think. And then this came out in 82, I think.
You're right.
To me, it's very interesting, because they both seem to have that, like, something inside something else,
I did have that thought about whether or not John Carpenter was influenced at all by Alien when he made this film, because there was a lot of similar. The aliens in both movies are quite wet. A lot of KY was used to the fractal effect.
Yeah.
And I think it's intended to evoke a very visceral, like repulsive sort of
disgust almost.
disgust. Yeah, you were in a way that I don't think any sort of space or even horror films really were doing up until Alien.
Yeah.
So I do think that Alien's influence is already evident 3 years after its release, because I think this film definitely took at least a couple of notes out of their book. But then, obviously, we'll probably talk about this more when we do our ratings. This movie itself has proven to be a inspiration for a lot of other films.
Sure, sure. Well, and this whole notion I want to add of, one of the things that makes this so horrifying is, yes, there's a threat from outside, but then it gets inside, and then it's coming from inside yourself,
Yeah.
right? So it's an outsider threat that becomes an insider threat, that becomes another outsider threat.
Yeah,
It's fascinating.
Exactly.
it is really.
So it's
Definitely
be
ahead of
careful
its
about
time.
categorizing, right?
Who do you guys think, before we get to the ratings,
Okay.
I need to ask who you think is the thing at the end. Is it McCready or is it Childs?
I don't think it's either. I vote for neither.
That they got rid of it?
Yeah.
So
But aren't we missing somebody? Isn't somebody still wandering around missing?
no, well, they never show him as having been assimilated, but Nulls is assumed, I think, by everybody to have been assimilated.
Okay.
There were storyboards
Yeah.
that were developed but not actually shot, of him being assimilated by the Dr. Blair thing at the
Okay.
end,
Okay.
similar to what happened to Gary in that last scene. Honestly, I never really thought about the question all that much, only because I respected too much the
Respect that the ambiguity.
ambiguity of it and the desire by John Carpenter to keep it ambiguous. Now, admittedly, in the years since then, he kind of has gone on, not gone off the reservation, but he's gone on to suggest or to confirm that at least one of them is a thing.
Really?
And which I think kind of breaks the mystique a little bit. But when I was watching it this time, Child shows up in a tan coat at the end, and he's wearing a blue one when they last see him. Why is there any reason?
It comes back to your clothes.
It comes back to the clothes theory.
Wow.
Why is there any reason for him to have changed his coat in that intervening time period? Now, again, can't rule it out.
Yeah.
But there's another theories, and that and I'm not breaking any new ground here. I'm just going off of what I've seen. That near the end, you see McCready filling up whiskey bottles with gasoline.
Yeah.
Uses Molotovs.
Yeah.
And he hands Childs one of what appears to be whiskey bottle at the end to take a drink of. And
Yeah.
some people speculated and theorized that what he's actually handed him is gasoline, and he just drinks it like it's nothing, suggesting that he would be a thing. And that McCready's smiling after he takes the swig is him,
Because he's
confirming.
confirming it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a lot there.
What is Carpenter? But you said Carpenter himself
Carpenter
said
has never said
one of them.
Yeah,
is.
I believe he has said one of them is, but he never can.
I think it's the other guy. I can't
Booth
believe
or
it's
Booth?
McCready.
Oh yeah, he's Childs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Childs spotted.
Well, especially since Childs is completely absent during the final.
Yeah.
The final.
Yeah,
He's just gone.
years.
Whereas we see McCready the entire time. Like, we're all over him the whole time. And I think he's too smart.
Yeah, way less opportunities for him to have been infected.
Correct. And I think that just the fact that Childs, who up at that point has been super paranoid, super eager to try to kill things, whatever, or stop whatever is happening, just completely is gone in that final scene, and seemingly leaves his post
Yeah.
for kind of the thinnest of reasons.
Yeah.
Especially when where he was stationed was near where the generator was.
Right.
So him walking away and then the generator turning off immediately thereafter is a little suspect.
Yeah. What do you think, JT?
I had always had the feeling that it was Childs,
Uh-huh.
for some of the reasons that Rob mentioned, and then watching it again, I kind of just had the same feeling that it probably was Childs that was infected. It would be a cool twist if it was McCready, but I just don't see any opportunities where he could have been infected, or if there are, they're so slim compared to the opportunities that
Yeah.
Childs had to be the one who was infected, if there is.
I will say, McCready does say, well, we're just going to have to wait.
Yeah.
Which goes with the theory of happy to get frozen again, happy to, happy to wait.
And it's very possible that that was intentionally sewed in there or put in there to kind of sow further ambiguity into the scene.
I mean, do we know what Kurt Russell thinks? Did he ever say?
I don't know if I don't know if he's ever actually come out publicly to say anything about it.
That was a surprise for me, by the way. Thank you, JT, for not telling tell me who was in it. Although I don't know that you would know that I would, realize who he was. But it was a very pleasant shock to see him in his heyday.
The one last question I have before we move on has to do with Dr. Blair, because obviously he's the only one that's kind of like ahead of the game here, figuring things out pretty quickly, which makes sense since he's a senior biologist. Did he make the right call with what limited resources and information he had available to him? Not taking apart the helicopter, taking apart the tractor, eliminating their communications equipment, but also doing it in such a way that he's kind of deemed to be crazy by the rest of the crew. And isolated in a shack. Did he do everything properly?
I don't think so. I think he should have told everybody of his suspicions. And, they're a team. I think that they should have received enough training to have all come on board and say, you're right. I mean, pretty much that's what they do anyway. We have to contain it. We have to kill it. We have to do whatever. I think he should have said something. And if not to the entire team, then he should at least have said something to the commander.
Yeah.
Say something to somebody.
Well,
I don't know how but I mean, of course, it doesn't lend itself to such a tension-filled movie to do that. But then again, at what point has he been taken over, right? The question of what is rational behavior in a super scary, super tension-filled situation is one, we don't know how we would respond to those.
And you're isolated.
And he was flipping out. He admits it at some point and says, yeah, I'm okay now. But back then I was completely scared.
And this is the reason why I asked the question is because, we obviously have never been driven to this level of extreme as he's finding himself in this situation. But there was, during the pandemic a few years ago and other situations where we're confronted with biological threats, this real question of what is ethical, what is responsible, and what is the responsibility of those in power who have the means to do something. He decided to take what in my mind was essentially a half measure, right? He eliminated the ability of anyone to reach the outside world or leave the base, but did not go to the final step of just blowing everybody up.
Yeah.
Sure. If you really felt convinced that there was no other path forward, that would be the way you take it.
Yeah.
But he also chose not to take the route that we talked about here of notifying chain of command, trying to contact someone on the mainland to bring in a specialized, people to come in and quarantine. He kind of did this thing that simultaneously ensured no one could leave, but also didn't necessarily resolve the problem itself.
Right. Correct.
And therefore left, and once he was taken out of the picture and essentially locked away, he lost all of his agency to do anything else about it and left it up to folks who weren't as aware of the gravity of the situation to try to figure it out amongst themselves.
Yeah. I mean, look, at some point he could have said, I know you don't believe me, but go look at my computer simulation. It's gonna, it'll run it for you.
Yeah.
He didn't,
No.
And it's not like it was unintelligible, like math, like JT has in his thesis, right? It's like words are coming across the screen. But again, I don't know what any of us would do if we were under that kind of pressure. Maybe you forget, I had a computer simulation just down the hall I could have showed you.
Yeah.
And
no, that's a fair point. I do think it's telling that once he's removed from the situation, the only other person who understands, the biology of what's going on, Fuchs, is eliminated pretty early on, probably because he's knowledgeable and understands about infection.
Yeah.
But he chooses to actually kill himself by virtue of self-immolation so that he cannot be assimilated and made to further this. So you have these decisions that these individuals are making on a person-by-person basis, not as a group.
And not a leader or a direct leadership or command.
Exactly.
But do you think then that maybe it means possibly, since it's like on an individual basis, that there's some interaction with something that might even be genetic inside that person?
Could be.
Maybe there's genetic expression
That drives them to
make certain decisions under certain like extreme
stressful
situations. I could see something maybe developing as a survival characteristic that would get coded into your DNA.
I mean, you were
And
in the
this
military.
the
I'm sure you saw people seize up when confronted with certain situations, or not seizing up by virtue, on the other end of things.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the military, of course, trains you, and continuously puts you through these trainings until
To overcome that.
right, so that it become. But what the military is doing is actually training you so often and so frequently then that your reaction is it's a muscle movement and more of
It's like
a
a routine.
habit.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the stimulus. This is how I respond. This is the stimulus. This is how I respond. And if you keep responding by running around, screaming your head off or getting petrified, somebody else comes along and either, slaps you upside the head or eventually says, this is not the place for you.
Yeah.
You kind of need to go because we can't have you freaking out on the battlefield.
Yeah.
You keep freaking out.
Right.
That said, I do think there's a step beyond that though, Rob, where certain people with certain characteristics are chosen for certain jobs. Um, in the movies we see it in a more extreme way with like the CIA, but not all the CIA. Like like the creepy people we think are in the CIA. The people in MI5 and MI6 who, the ones, not necessarily MI5, MI6, but the ones in the movies where it's like, we need to call somebody to do something really like off book, dastardly. Who can we find? It can't be a normal person who has a regular sense of integrity and the law. It needs to be somebody who thinks outside like that. They say people are chosen for those things and a lot of things to do with like becoming a SEAL, becoming a ranger, becoming a paratrooper. There's a whole personality construct around that and characteristics that they're looking for. And when they put you through the training, it's not really about, I mean, some of it is about, can you physically do it? Can you jump up and down? Can you do all those things? But when they get down to testing your emotional capability, that is all about, finding those triggers in those particular situations to see what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And if you can't pass, that's where I think most people don't pass there. It's not the like, can you do 5,000 push-ups or not?
Right. It's the
It's
like
the emotional piece.
So and that all makes sense, and I think it's good that they are trying to screen for emotional or psychological well-being or ability to deal with some of these high stress situations. But it does raise the question in my mind, understanding that this is obviously very outlandish or less than usual scenario. Should we be thinking about training folks who might have to respond to things like this with some of these kind of outside the box scenarios so that it's not shocking if they're ever having to be confronted with it?
I think we need a planetary response
yeah.
core of some sort. Yeah.
That maybe
That trains for this.
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe it's not this exact scenario, but this idea of you are confronted with a situation in which there is an adversary who may not be immediately apparent, but is here.
Right.
What is the decision-making process that you go through to determine your options?
Yeah.
And what is the best route to take, understanding that everyone around you might be compromised?
I think you're completely right about this, Rob, because you would not want to compose a team of people who are the same old people.
Right.
You would need people who just think differently and behave differently and look at things, maybe they're not even successful as regular human beings because they have this odd approach to things, or they learn, the people who learn through smell or taste, they don't actually learn through sight or hearing like most of us.
Yeah.
Those kinds of people, all different kinds of oddball people. But I don't know how you test for that. That said, at the very least, I would think if you were going to create this kind of a core, I would recommend that they pull from a whole bunch of different entities. It can't just be on the military. It should be the military and, people from CDC or with that kind of background and people with, I don't know, an engineering background, all different kinds of backgrounds, people who can do all kinds of different things because we don't know what we're going to be facing.
Yeah.
and in what conditions he would even here on the planet.
Yeah.
We don't
Or
know.
like how good are you when you're cold? Well,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, when you're that cold, what's your
military
does
ability
that?
like in that scenario?
Yeah.
But not everyone outside the DoD is dealing with that sort of training in adverse conditions. Like,
Yeah.
how
Even
does that
some
impact
Arizona.
decision making?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It does make me wonder about astronauts and how they're chosen, or how they will be chosen for when we start, putting people on Mars or on some of these other planets. Because we definitely expect people are planning for weirdness to come out of those situations. How do you choose a person from one planet to deal with something completely, we can't even dream up the scenario somewhere else?
How you train
Yeah.
to anticipate things that we can't even anticipate right now, or not to anticipate, but to deal with things we can't anticipate.
Right.
You're not gonna have real time communication.
Yeah.
Back home.
Well, and did you guys see Interstellar?
Yeah.
Right. So remember, Matt Damon's character, the last person in the thing in the world, in the universe that you would think would flip.
Yeah.
But he freaked out. He could not deal.
Yeah, and he was supposedly the commander.
The best.
Previous, right?
Yeah, he was best of the best, right?
Best of the best. Yeah.
And I want to point out on a snow planet and on an ice planet too.
Yeah.
Something else to consider. Or it's a fear for us, right? A fear for us that we're going to be somewhere cold and alone.
This is where we're gonna die. Yeah. The very last question I have is it normal for research stations in Antarctica to have flamethrowers?
No.
They seem
I can't
to
think
have a
of
lot.
I mean, maybe like if you get snowed in, like I'm trying to think of a.
I was just thinking, it was very convenient that they had that.
If you get
otherwise,
snowed in,
really doomed.
There must be. Well, yeah, they might have them to actually melt the snow or do something like
I
that.
guess I could see
Yeah.
that, but I thought it was very curious.
Yeah,
As I was
yeah.
going back to rewatch this, that they had not just flamethrower, but just an immense amount of fuel for the flamethrower too. From
Yeah, easily loaded as well.
Yeah,
Like,
easily loaded, ready
Yeah.
to go. They must have constantly reloading at speed because they never seem to have run out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so shall we read it?
Yeah, let's go to the ratings.
Okay.
Okay. So the first category is the relevance to commission recommendations.
Uh-huh.
What do you guys think? I think I would give it 4.
I gave it a 4 too.
Yeah, I think it's we've touched on a lot of topics here. Yeah, safety, biosecurity, diagnostics, threat characterization, response to biological threats, and obviously, as we talked about, astro. Yeah, this is a big part of what we're looking at.
And clearly the need for some bilingualness, I think, as we're trying to deal with other countries on this planet, I think.
I do wonder if that was less of a shot at the Norwegians and more of a shot at the Americans.
I agree. I say I'm not ragging on the Norwegian guy. They did not give him a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
And today, maybe we would at least take the time to ask Google what he's trying to say.
Hey, would we have reception?
Well, maybe not with Starlink.
I don't
we had
know.
Starlink.
Maybe.
So the next category is scientific accuracy. I mean, obviously there are things that are, fantastical about this and, kind of go over the line, and there isn't very much attention, I think, paid to the scientific aspects, like what Rob was saying with the autopsy and things like that. So I think like the most I could probably go is like a 3.5.
I give it a 3.
I think I would do 3. I would otherwise have said 2.5, but I'm going to give it a 3 because they are purposely dealing in the fantastical. Yeah, I don't want to punish them too much for that, because I mean, it's good to raise these sorts of situations for as food for thought for us. So I would say 3, understanding that, once you get into the actual science piece, they understood they needed to do diagnostics.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of these specifics.
The specifics around that was
accurate.
Yeah. So I would say 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. The next category is scenario development. 5 for me.
You gave it a 5?
5, 4, 5, 4.
I gave it a 4.
I think just the nature of where it's taking place in that like isolated environment, I think just makes it all the better of the scenario. They could have had this thing land in New York City or Hong Kong or wherever, and now you have a disaster movie. Rather than having it in this isolated setting with this small cast of characters.
Yeah, I'd have to go back to double check to kind of see that, from a filmmaking history perspective, did this sort of movie start with Alien, or were there other films that did this very intensely claustrophobic?
Yeah, the claustrophobic stuff.
For 1979. But I do agree with you. It is somewhat it is a somewhat unique scenario, which is again a good inspiration for discussions like this. So I would probably say 4.
Well, before we move off of this though, if Alien came out a few years before this, would you say that the scenario for this is better or worse than the scenario for Alien? Because I think they did a really, really good job with Alien.
I think
this doesn't seem quite, to me, quite as good a scenario, but it's more horrifying, or about the same horrifying.
It is about the same. It is, well, it's interesting. Despite them feeling the same on some levels, it's a different kind of terror, right?
Right.
It's in Alien, it's something in the shadows that could strike at any moment.
Right.
Here, it's the guy who's literally standing right next to you might turn into a monster at any second.
Right.
It's at the end of the day, the hackles on on the back of your neck are going up regardless, but it's a different threat, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that it's different enough. Now, admittedly, this is being pulled from a book that was released decades prior, and there were a couple of other one or two adaptations. Thing from Another World, which is kind of I think it might even be a black and white movie that was based on that one as well. So it's not like it's the first time we've ever wrestled with this idea, but the first time I think that they injected this level of unease, uncertainty, and paranoia at this level into it. So I on the one hand, I think it does differentiate itself enough from Alien that I would consider it not to be a 1-for-1.
Yeah.
And I mean that as a positive. But at the same time, it's not wholly unique because it is based off an existing property.
Right.
Exactly. So I'm torn.
Okay, I'm still at a 4.
Okay.
Myself.
I think we could do a 4.
I would say 4.
I'm happy with a 4.
I would say 4.
Okay.
All right. Next category is entertainment value. 5 for this one.
Oh yeah, I say 5.
Okay, and then next category is success of the imagination or creativity.
So this is where I would ding it a little bit, just because it is based on something that was written and have been adapted before, and clearly it's pulling some inspiration from Alien.
Yeah.
So I'd ding it a little bit, but I wouldn't go too far.
Yeah.
I think it still is able to do its own thing.
It still differentiates it, like in the way you were saying with the person next to you. And
so I would say 3, 5, or 4. That's kind of where my head's at.
What do you think, JT?
I would probably go up to 4. What do you think?
I thought it was very imaginative. I gave it a 4, but I take your point, Rob. I mean, some of it is derivative.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of imaginative and creative.
Right.
So 3, 5, or 4? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the decider, JT.
I'll give it a 4.
Okay.
Just looking at the previous ratings.
Okay.
Shock or surprise value would be the next category. I didn't think anything was. I'm trying to think. Was there anything that was?
I mean, there was at least.
So that's like a differentiator from Alien, where
Alien was very. It kept shocking you.
I think Alien happens more frequently. I think there are two moments in particular that are like a shock jump scare sort of situation. One, when you have the dark through the person's stomach opens, you're on a defibrillator scene. It's very surprising to see that. And then because at the time you're expecting a different sort of action to happen. Remember that you've got Clark with a scalpel in his hand and he's about to attack McCready, and all your violence is there. You're not really paying as much attention to what's going on over here, and then all of a sudden there's a mouth in this guy's stomach. So that's a jump scare. And then when they have the blood testing scene, and the blood literally leaps out of you, leaps out of the dish. I think those are surprising, but I also don't think that this movie is really about that.
It's more of a psychological.
It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
It's a slow burn, a paranoia sort of film. It takes 45 minutes for any of them to die. It's designed to build tension, and there's a lot of suggestion and implication of who could be infected, but they make a point of not having the jump scares as much because they want you to kind of fill in the dread yourselves. So I would say probably 3 at best.
That's what I'm thinking too. 3
Me
would
too.
probably be my max.
Yeah.
Okay. The next category is government policy.
I gave it a 2
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
max.
I think you're being kind there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like if there were any protocols, they definitely didn't follow them.
Yeah. I would.
maybe even a 1. You're right, Rob.
Yeah.
I mean, even with the Norwegians, how fast could that situation have occurred? I'm positive that the policy, if there wasn't any policy, there should have been a policy that said, as soon as something happens here, you are like 4 miles away from there. You better tell them what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can't get them on communications, then that is one of the reasons we gave you a helicopter. But in this case, it didn't seem, they all seemed to be like they
just
knew
had
where we were, but they weren't talking to each other. And
they felt that they're totally fine bringing back a specimen from a Norwegian station when it's clear something real.
yeah,
Not to mention that could be an international incident.
Exactly.
Stole something.
Yeah.
I would have thought, like, the government policy should be, okay, if anything happens out here and the communications go down, look, you need to go over here
Should be
and press the
continuous
button
Yeah.
for the, the signal that's just gonna send, and you guys might all die, but eventually the clouds are gonna clear, the weather is gonna clear, and we will find out. That is, I'm
Yeah.
positive, the policy, a policy. We didn't see any of that.
Yeah.
The closest we got to that was try and raise somebody on comms.
Yeah.
Right.
That was it. And it wasn't even a private sector, at least in Alien. It's a private company. Granted, it's on contract, we find out.
Yeah.
But still, they're off, doing whatever they're doing. This is,
Suppose
I guess,
scientists
academic
or academic.
academic scientists, but they're on NSF
Yeah.
contract or grant or something. The government, and plus it's Antarctica.
Yeah.
The government, all of the governments are there. They're
Yeah.
doing something. So, nah.
Yeah.
I give it a 1. What did you?
I would say I think 1 is
Okay.
Yeah. I'm fine with that.
fair. Portrayal by the actors is
Fantastic.
the next category. Yeah. I don't have many.
I gave him a 4.
Give 'em a
Everyone,
4.
nothing.
I'd say 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Okay. 4 or 5.
Or Russell and
And
Keith.
Keith,
Oh, Keith
and
was great.
Brimley.
Yeah.
And like, just go down the call sheet. It's just-
Yeah. The dog.
the dog. I mean, the
Oh,
dog.
you're right. The dog gets a half a point right there. That's right. You're right.
Okay. Next category is direction.
I thought this was also very strong. I mean, I already talked about kind of how the camera moved through some of these scenes and the fact that they do decide to make it a slow burn sort of film, which Alien does a little bit as well, but I think this does it even more. Yeah, I agree. To great effect. So I would say at least a 4, maybe a 4 or 5.
I give it a 5.
Yeah, I give it a 5.
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't think
I don't have no notes.
they had to be, the director set the tone, right? And the director told them what to do and all that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know about the flying saucer part.
Well, not that
That
part.
was terrible. But
Sorry,
the
that's not like the opening of the film. You're seeing like the white landscape.
yeah, so, the dog running and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I think a 5.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay. Production is the next category, and for the time, I think it probably should get high marks because it is widely considered to be a practical effects
Yeah, and that's
piece.
I think the practical effects alone warrant this to be a very high mark. I mean, I think it ended up, again, being inspiration for a lot of practical effects for the following 10 to 20 years before CGI really took over. One other piece from the production perspective that I did want to briefly mention, because I just took note of it, and it's just so subtle, and I didn't even really notice it the first time I watched it. It was only this time. When you come back to Dr. Blair near the end, and he's asking you to be let out. He's eating from a can, and you don't really think of any of it. And then there's a noose right next to him. There's a noose hanging next to him that presumably he must have set up at some point.
Yeah.
And so now the question is, was he assimilated before he managed to kill himself?
Wow.
So there's just a little production
Yeah.
that detail. There's that detail that makes you think, and they just leave it there, and you get to infer whatever you want from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to the other characters don't say anything. You just kind of get to infer. Does this mean that he was turned by this point? Maybe not. Who knows?
Do you prepare in case he got turned and he's
He's waiting for the future
Yeah.
state.
So,
Yeah.
so I mean, the production, the set, and obviously the practical effects told as much of this story as the actors did.
Yeah.
So I would give it very high marks.
Yeah, I would say a 5.
Okay.
Okay. And finally, the last category is the writing.
Aside from them writing that computer scene, which I know was done to provide exposition and to set the stakes, right?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me. It was as much like with Mission Impossible 2, it was designed to tell the viewer, okay, this is how how it's a threat. Is what you need.
so bad.
This is what you need to be looking out for, when you look to see if people are assimilated. And this is why it matters if this thing escapes, right? Because it'll infect the whole planet in 3 years. So I get that. I still think it could have been better executed. So I would probably knock half point off for that scene, but otherwise I think the writing was pretty great too.
What do you think?
I mean, it's pretty simplistic, right? There's not a lot of opportunity for soaring language or overly complicated scenes or
A lot of the scripts are really just like scene descriptions, right? Or like set descriptions, because there's a lot of time, and I'd have to go back and watch it again to tell for certain. But a lot of screen time is just without title.
Dead space,
yeah. I guess
That's part of
maybe.
part of the writing, though. And I think like what they don't tell you. In other films, it's frustrating. In this one, it's intentional.
Yeah.
I think I think it does work well, because we get to have these conversations. Who is infected when?
Yeah.
Who are what was the pathway? Like, there's a reason I didn't put the pathway of the infection in the memo, and that's because it's still debated today.
Yeah, it's all hypothetical.
It's all hypothetical. Yeah, you can make as much inferences as you want from, okay, this person was in last contact with this person, but it almost sends you on like a epidemiologist's journey,
Which is a fun activity.
Yeah.
People who want to get further engaged with this property.
Great.
So
I would say either somewhere between a 4, 4.5, maybe.
I'd say 4.
Let's give it a 4.
4. Okay.
Okay.
So the final rating is 3.86.
I think we're going to have to work on our rating scheme.
We can.
Do you think it was too low?
No, I think that most of our ratings are coming in the 3.8.
3.7, 3.8.
Yeah.
I always said the episodes that I've been on, we do end up giving out a lot of 4s. I do think that
Yeah.
is the case. But that's also because we're choosing very good movies to review.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
I mean,
We have not
we
chosen something
we could do
intentionally horrible.
Right.
Yeah, we could do like a Hammer film next time. Something that's more cheesy that isn't as good. But I mean, when you talk about the top list of movies best movies of all time, this obviously.
Yeah.
But I think that's a fair, especially given the government policy issue.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Asha and Rob.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, man is the warmest
Place to hide.